A common complaint by millennials, myself included, is that baby boomers aren't retiring/giving up powerful positions/getting out of the way. Did boomers have to go through the same thing in their time? At what age did the average boomer make it and become in charge? I think the point back then was you didn't have to make it big to succeed. You could plod along happily in an ordinary job in retail or services and still be able to support yourself and your family and have nice things. You might be waiting to fill dead man's shoes to get promoted, but you had a good job. Now, with inflation and wage stagnation and job insecurity increasing, ordinary jobs don't pay for a good life anymore, and we're all hoping for that lucky break. In the 70s, one could put oneself through law school at a top-tier university entirely by working part-time as a waiter, with no help from mom and dad, incurring zero debt in the process. Back then? What time frame are you thinking about? 1950s? 1960s? The boomers were born from 1946 to 1964, which means a lot of us are still working. I'm one of the last, born in 1964. Retirement age is 67, meaning I still have 12 more years of work. Interest rates at the time of my high school graduation were 18%, so borrowing money was a no-go. Pensions were a thing of the past for most companies by the time I joined the workforce in 1986, so I've had to save my 401k just like everyone else. While some older boomers may share blame for the state we find ourselves in, I suspect more responsibility should be placed on the greatest generation and the silent generation, who were the ones in power for most of my lifetime. It depends on the area, but in reality, most of us have never been in charge. I was an academic. Boomer students created a huge expansion of higher education, which meant hiring lots of PhDs born pre-boom. By the time academic boomers got their degrees, the jobs were filled and stayed that way for most of my life. When I attended the retirement of my favorite prof, a classic pre-boomer academic, there was huge buzz at the event because a recent grad student landed a tenure-track position, something that could only happen because Drive S and his generation were retiring. Most boomer academics gave up on academe because the only jobs they could hope for were as underpaid, benefit-free, one-year-at-a-time sessionals. Auto, management and administration jobs were all over the place. The growth of business education had not yet happened, so many a PhD ended up as a lifetime mid-level manager, as the later blossoming of business education then meant they were not considered qualified for senior management because they had the wrong degrees. Realistically, few of any generation become the ones in charge. The huge majority of the workforce is just that, workies. Salary or hourly, macht nichts, the average boomer went to work for a boss and still has one. The boomers are now 55 to 73 years old. The traditional retirement age is 65 in most Western countries. So, only half have even reached the traditional retirement age, and, given the economy in which we have operated since the oil crisis of the 1970s and its rampant inflation, most of that group has to continue to work because they simply cannot afford to retire. Between stagnant wages, another result of having so many workers chasing so few jobs, and higher costs of living, they spent what should have been their retirement savings on raising their kids and giving the next generation what they believed it needed to succeed. Did we go through the same thing? Yes, or at least a variation of it. And now, we're as stuck as you are. My husband would love to retire. But there are too many people economically dependent on him for that to happen, and even though he has paid into a well-managed pension all his life, it was not so well-managed that we could continue to support those people if he stopped working. Among whom, by the way, are two struggling millennials. The same generation who benefited from the advancement of the middle class is also benefiting from the expansion of quality living and age. They are also one generation, generally, removed from the Depression, WW2, and hearing their parents relate having to live without. So when they get some shit, they want to keep their shit. Even though the shit they have is a result of everyone's sacrifice. I want to focus just on a part of this. I feel like you're referring to retiring from higher-up positions like CEO primarily, maybe from political power too. One issue which makes today's situation different is that people grow much older and therefore often have to work much longer. And in politics, that is not only an issue of old people staying in office longer, but since they grow older and become an even bigger part of our society, they still decide indirectly through elections. In the future, this could lead to very undemocratic situations where everything is dictated by the old. The assumption is that boomers all have powerful positions. We don't. There are some occupations, carpenter, electrician, machinist, where the average age is over 50. Millennials don't want these jobs. Or don't seem to, despite the fact that they can be lucrative. So my 57-year-old is still lugging shingles bundles onto rooftops. And then there is this tidbit. I did all right until I was 57, was laid off, and because of my age, have not been able to gain back what I had been making at my old job. At 62 I earned 2/3 of what I earned in 2014. It's possibly because I'm slightly guessing plus my own experience. We were told over and over again in school that all these trade jobs aren't what people need to be doing and university is where you need to go. In my entire year group 3 people went to college for these types of jobs and the rest of us were told to focus on A-levels and then uni. Millennials don't want these jobs. I think this is inaccurate. Millennials were raised, told by their boomer and Gen X parents, to go to college and avoid these labor-intensive occupations at all costs. They were raised being told to study and work hard so they could avoid these positions, with these positions treated as lesser than. And now that they're adults they're being ridiculed by the same people who told them to work hard in school to stay out of those jobs that, oh, you don't know how to fix anything and you're lazy and don't want to pursue technical vocations. I'm a Xennial, so to speak. Born in '82 to people that also split the gap between boomers/X. This shit was hammered into me. I had to go to college. I had to escape that blue-collar pit. Not going to college was never an option I was given, so by the time I was old enough to decide for myself, what the fuck other choice was I going to make? Now I'm doing pretty well now for myself. I've managed to integrate my education into a tangentially related occupation and, now in my late 30s, I'm doing okay. But it took me a good decade after college working in retail and other shit jobs to unfuck my situation. Even then, I'm still saddled with student loan debt that, while it doesn't cause me to wonder where my next meal is coming from or worry about covering the mortgage, it still severely handcuffs my spending power. So let's tone down the millennials don't want these jobs a rhetoric. Because while it may be true after a fashion, there's a very specific reason for it, and it all comes back to who raised them to think like that. I did all right until I was 57, was laid off. I think this is important for people to understand. I'm Gen X, watched my mom try and re-enter the workforce in middle age, after being out for 20 or so years raising me and my sister. Ageism is a real thing that people don't notice until they see it happen to someone else or it happens to them. My mom now has a lucrative real estate business, and she would love to pass it down to a young upstart millennial, but she can't because she still needs to work to survive. Also, trades are making a comeback. I'm a teacher, and my district has a huge career training program for high school. They offer all kinds of things: carpentry, welding, CDL, CNA, automotive repair, etc. It's great, and I wish we had some of the stuff when I was in school, like the early college program where you can get an associate's degree or get all your required classes out of the way while still in high school.